Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Good morning, everyone. It got chilly and windy all of a sudden. I don't like that. I like the chilly part. I don't like the windy part. Meditating in the cold is the best type of meditation. Does anyone take ice baths? No? Y'all need to take some ice baths. It's perfect meditation. I used to live in Denver for grad school, and one of my first meditation teachers was a Korean Zen monk who taught me how to meditate in the snow. That was not fun. But it was very helpful practice. Okay, well, welcome back. It's been a while since we have a class, or at least it feels like it's been a while. After our winter retreat in December, we took a break, now we're back. So a lot of new faces, which is great. So for those of you that are new, welcome. My name is Venerable Thich Quang Tri, or you can just call me Quang Tri, Master Quang Tri, or Brother Quang Tri, whatever suits your needs. I am one of the monks here at the Fukui Buddhist Temple. I am the go-to person when it comes to sutra study or meditation, apparently. So here comes the class. So usually we split up classes in two parts for the year. The first part for the first half of the year and the second part for the second half of the year. And each part typically has a theme. And last year's theme was, well, it really didn't have a theme. We had just come back from COVID, the COVID apocalypse. I don't think we had any classes at all in 2020, right? I don't remember. The whole year was a blur. I have deleted it. It doesn't exist. So last year, I think we came halfway, and because we were gone for so long, I kind of restarted the themes. So most of last year's classes had to do with all the different types and methods and techniques of meditation that we had already gone through previously in the past. So it started out going over a Buddhist discourse called Anapanasati, which is the mindfulness on breathing discourse or sutra. And it has 16 practices that the Buddha taught us to go through the meditation. And I think we only got like maybe through the first 6 or 8, where then I made the decision to stop, because the first 4 or 6 is pretty much the foundation, the fundamental practice of meditation as is, which was just meditating on the breath and how to observe our breathing through meditation by the breath. And the remaining had to do a little bit more with bodily sensations, mental sensations, and feelings, where I just didn't feel like it was appropriate to talk about, only because of the audience, right? I have to change how I teach according to the audience, and there was too many new people to go through something very hardcore Buddhism, because not everyone here is Buddhist, right? But this is a Buddhist meditation class, so everything that I do teach you is Buddhist-based, because we have to remember that there are different types of meditation out there in the world. There's the religious or spiritual type, and then there's the, what's a nice word to say? The mundane type, right? The type of meditation you would typically get through a mindfulness course, or through school or your workplace, or even through psychologists, right? There's a lot of these mindfulness practices and techniques out there now that are not spiritual or religious at all, but they're helpful techniques to help people get through some mental humps, right? And so I do not teach that here. I'm not here to teach you how to release your anxiety or your stress or your depression. I'm not a doctor. That's not my job. My job is to help you control your mind, to concentrate your mind, to hone the thought process, and to work on what we call the monkey mind, right? The mind that, like a monkey, jumps from one tree to the other. Likewise, our thoughts jump from one thought to another, right? We're constantly thinking. So we are here to help you lessen that monkey mind. Although the side effects of meditation, the pseudo effects that you get, does come in, right? You do have a reduction in stress and in anxiety and all that stuff, right? That's a byproduct of meditation. That will come anyway, but that is not the main focus here. It'll just naturally happen on its own. So, with that said, just quickly, because I've made some changes to the lesson plan. Can someone open the door, please? If it's locked, I'm not sure. So I made some changes to the curriculum for this first section or first part of the year. So I've decided to include or incorporate walking meditation as well through our practice, because typically we just do sitting meditation, and we only do walking meditation when we are specifically talking about walking meditation. So, but walking meditation is pretty, I guess not really popular, but it's a common question always arises, and it's a common request. So I'm going to include that as well in our session, which means I'm going to have to, the class typically is about an hour and 15 minutes, for the most part. But I'm going to add an extra 15 minutes, so it'll be an hour and a half. That way we can still have our normal sitting, which typically lasts anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes, maybe sometimes 30 minutes, depending on how much I talk. And then we'll do walking meditation. And we'll just do it inside today, since I doubt anybody wants to walk in a blizzard. But we'll add some walking meditation to our sit today. And then, what I was also going to do is, as some of you know, last year, a couple months ago, I published a new book called Meditations, Aspirations and Reflections for a Happier Life, which goes over pretty much what we really discussed all of last year. The different types of meditation, the different techniques and methods to meditate. But the bulk of the book is on gathas. Gathas is a poem-like paragraph or sentence in Buddhism that gives you the chance or opportunity to reflect on that gatha, reflect on that poem, reflect on whatever it is, and meditate on it to help you kind of open up your mind to it, right? To help you see things differently or understand things differently. So my intention was to kind of go over some of those gathas through this class, through this part of this first year for the classes. So I will still kind of do that, but what I want to do mostly, and what we will be practicing mostly, is kind of continuing on the theme that we had for our winter retreat, which was developing concentration through mindfulness, right? And so we will still go over some basic techniques and methods that we typically go through, and then use some of these gathas to reflect on. But mostly what I want to do for this part, this first part of the year, is really work on developing and honing our concentration skills. Because that is what meditation is, right? What is meditation? It's a question here, right? What is meditation? What is Buddhist meditation? Who thinks meditation is to clear your mind? Raise your hand. If you think meditation is to clear your mind, raise your hand. You've been my student for how many years and you're raising your hand? Meditation is not about clearing your mind, despite the popular belief that it is. It is eventually, but that is not the main point here. Because we have this false believe that meditation is to have no thinking, to not think at all, to have this completely serene and empty mind, right? But if you did have this serene and empty mind, then what is the point of meditation? What are you meditating for? You're just sitting. If you want to sit, go home and watch TV and sit, right? But meditation, there is a point to meditation. And the point to meditation, Buddhist meditation, is to develop that concentration, to hone our concentration skills so that we can use that concentration to further our development in different types and levels of meditation. In Buddhism, there's two main methods of meditation called samatha and vipassana. Samatha is calming. Vipassana is insight meditation. So we have to really work on samatha, being able to calm our mind to a point where we can achieve something that's called samadhi. Samadhi is almost perfect concentration. It's like the one point of concentration. And that is essentially what is going to be our goal. Because you have to have perfect concentration in order to do vipassana, insight meditation. And it's through insight meditation where you would typically want to use these gathas or any teaching or anything you want to reflect on to kind of work through that during vipassana. Because that's where we start to dissect things, to see what they're really about, right? If you're using a Buddhist teaching, for example, in vipassana, and there's different types of vipassana as well, right? The basic general version is the concentration on really just watching the sensations and feelings in our body, right? But beyond that, there's also the contemplation. The contemplations part is where we take the Four Noble Truths, for instance, right? The most basic Buddhist teaching, Four Noble Truths. And we dissect the Four Noble Truths to see what they really are about, right? Because the Four Noble Truths, if we read it at face value, it's that life is suffering, the cause of suffering, the cessation of suffering, and the way to cessate the suffering, right? That's the Four Noble Truths. Face value that may not make any sense to you, right? But as you read through those Four Noble Truths and you read more about it and you're trying to understand exactly what it means to have suffering in life, what it means to see the causes that cause the suffering, what it means to practice the way out of suffering, right? So when we read about that, then we go into contemplation and we dissect the teaching. We try to see what is suffering. What is suffering to us? What do the texts mean by suffering? What do my fellow meditators think about suffering? What do I think about suffering? What is suffering, right? And you dissect it. You go through the teachings. You really start to debate it with yourself to really figure out exactly what suffering means. And eventually, you'll have an aha moment where like, okay, now I totally get it, right? And that's essentially how we achieve enlightenment, is by contemplating. So we will mostly work, for the first half of the year, we'll be working on the samatha, right? Developing our concentration. And we will mostly stick with, because last time we went through different methods. We went through meditating on the breath, we went through visualization, we went through chanting meditation, we went through walking meditation, what else? And a few others. There was like 7 or 8. We won't do any of that this time because I've already gone through it maybe 2 or 3 times. So if that's something we want to read about or learn about, please go back and watch our videos because they're all recorded. And you can go through each class because every class went through one session, went through one type of meditation object or method. So find the one you're interested in and go with it. This time around, the only thing I will repeat is Anapanasati, the meditation on the breath, or being mindful of the breath. And so that is going to be our meditation object for this entire first part of the year for the course, meditating on our breath. And it's by meditating on our breath where we will hopefully develop that super strong concentration that will give you that mindless mind of no thoughts, right? But that happens when it happens. So what I typically do for the first class coming back is just go over the basics, go over the overview of what we're going to be doing here, go over what we'll be talking about, and kind of give you some of the foundation and the basics of what we'll be doing for the remainder of the classes, because I want you to at least know what you need to know. That way when you come to future classes, that you can just sit and sit. I don't have to repeat myself every time to tell you how to sit. So today we'll be going again. We just briefly discussed, what meditation is, and I'll be discussing some of the other important know-hows of posture, how to sit, where to sit, what to do, et cetera, and hopefully have time to do some sitting and walking meditation later. But the goal, again, is using our breath as our object of meditation, and we want to develop something called access concentration. Access concentration is the preliminary state of mind, a state of consciousness, where gives you the green light to kind of further your development, to go into higher states of consciousness. Because in Buddhist meditation, to perfect samadhi, right, perfect concentration, means that we also start practicing something called the four jhanas, or the four dhyanas. They are meditative absorption states. They are high states of consciousness during meditation. And you cannot achieve level 1 without perfecting access concentration. And access concentration isn't necessarily difficult to enter, to accomplish, but it does require some pretty serious discipline, self-discipline, and practice. Because I'm here to teach you a discipline. I'm here to teach you a way of life, so to speak, right? Meditation is not a hobby. Meditation is not something you can just pick up every once in a while. Meditation is not something you can just come to class every second and fourth Saturday of the month. If that's your mentality of meditation, then you're never going to achieve anything in meditation. You won't be able to achieve any fruits of the meditation practice. Because even if you're just trying to calm yourself, calm your mind, calm anxiety and stress and all that pseudo effects that come with the meditation practice, you still have to practice. You still have to have a disciplined practice, right? And when I say disciplined practice, I don't mean having to sit an hour a day, 2 hours a day, right? That's not what I mean. As monastics, we sit for almost 3 to 4 hours a day in meditation. That's because this is my job. But for you, sitting 20, 30 minutes is sufficient. But you have to constantly keep that every single day. Even if it's just 5 minutes, really. Because it's really about the quality, not the quantity. Because you can sit for an hour and just completely lost and drowned in thoughts and distractions, versus sitting for 5 minutes and you're completely calm and serene, right? Which would you prefer to have? A 5-minute serene mind or a 30-minute complicated junky mind, right? Probably 5 minutes. So even if it's just 5 to 10 minutes a day, that's perfectly fine. But you have to be consistent about it. You have to develop that mentality that this is not a hobby. This is a discipline. This is a practice I need to be serious about. Only then will you truly be able to benefit from the fruits of meditation, right? So try to give yourself that 10 minutes a day of practicing, right? Whether you have to give up 5 minutes of Netflix or TikToks, or wake up a little bit earlier, or just not do something. I don't know what your lives are like, but you know you. So you have to find that time, find that ability to incorporate that practice into your life. And trust me, after a while, you will see a huge difference. Sometimes it's very subtle, and sometimes you may not be able to recognize it in yourself, but others would be able to recognize it within you. right? Because through mindfulness practice, through observing our mind, and through really being aware of how our thoughts work, because that's also one of the goals of meditation, is to figure out who you are. Figure out who you are. Because as we sit and meditate, and we'll talk about labeling shortly, but as you sit and meditate, you're really watching your mind. Because as things arise, whether it's a distraction or a thought or even feeling, we will take this thing called labeling. And so as something arises, if you hear the door open, or if you hear the dogs barking, or you have a thought for food or whatever it is, what we typically habitually do is figure out who's opening a door, whose dog is that, who dares disturb us in the middle of our meditation, right? Or maybe a thought food comes up because it's almost lunchtime, so you're thinking, oh, what do I want to eat? Do I have to go somewhere? Do I want to pick something up? Do I want to cook something at home? Whatever it is, right? These are habitual thoughts as these things arise. But that's the wrong way of doing things. So we have a thing called labeling. So as things arise, whether the door opens, or you hear the dog bark, or food, or smell, or taste, whatever it is, you simply label it for what it is. Door, or sound, barking, or dog, food, or hunger. You just give it a quick label and let it be, right? Otherwise, we start entertaining that thought. We start going with the flow, and we start making a whole movie in our mind. Next thing you know it, you spent the whole 30 minutes daydreaming about food, right? What'd you sit 30 minutes for? You wasted all your time for nothing on food. It's not even real food, it's like mental, imaginary food, which is even worse. So as we sit here, keep in mind to label. And as we start labeling, after a while, what you want to do with these labels is create this index. We want to create this label chart, right? So we can see exactly how our mind thinks or works. So you kind of group these different labels together, and you see where your mind goes throughout your meditations. Oh, I'm thinking a lot about food, or I'm thinking a lot about this person who causes me anger all the time, or I'm thinking a lot about my job that I hate, or I'm thinking about moving, or I'm thinking about my significant other, whatever it is, right? You see this trend chart, and you see what arises most and how it makes you feel and why it makes you feel that way. Then you have something graspable. You have something that you can do something about, right? Whether it's a person that causes you anger or dissatisfaction or just causes you mental anguish, and they're always arising because you're always bringing up how they make you feel, well, now you have something that's like, okay, well, now this person or this person, now I see that this person is making me feel this way, and it comes up a lot. So now you have something that you can do something about. Maybe you have to start distancing yourself from this person. Maybe you have to unfriend them. Maybe you have to do whatever you have to do, right? To lessen or to get rid of that altogether, right? So that's where labeling typically helps as well. Not just to stop us from making a mental movie, but to also help us figure out how our mind works. And over time, as you start taking things off the list, right, because you're doing something about them, then that means you have less of those distractions arising. You have less of those feelings arising. You have less of those anguishes making you feel anguishy, right? And then that's where the fruits of meditation come in. Because when you start releasing and letting go of those anxieties and those anguishes, then you become less stressed about things, right? Because they're no longer there to distract you. They're no longer there to cause you suffering. So now you're a happier, better person, hopefully. And so you may not see those effects right away, but other people will be able to see them, right? Now you're not so stressed about life, or you're not so stressed about working or going here and there, whatever it may be, right? But those changes are subtle, and we may not always be able to see them right away, but they're there. So when we meditate, and if you're thinking a lot, don't worry about it. It's our natural human habit to think. There's no stopping our thinking. It's impossible to stop your thinking. The point is to recognize and be aware and mindful that you're thinking. Think all you want, I don't care. But know that you think. Know that thinking is arising. Because when you're aware and you say, oh, I'm thinking, and you start labeling food, door, sound, smell, blah, 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 that's a huge accomplishment because you're doing meditation. Meditation is being aware of what you're doing. It's being aware of what you're thinking. Not to stop your mind. It's impossible to stop your mind. Give me your mind and I'll stop it for you, though. Give it to me. Open up your brain and give me your mind and I'll stop it for you. You cannot do that. So your mind cannot be stopped, but your mind can slow down. And so this is where meditation comes in. So as we label, as we sit, don't worry about thinking. Think all you want. Just know that you're thinking. Acknowledge that a thought has arisen. Maybe it'll take you a second or two, maybe it takes you a minute, maybe it takes you the whole session before you recognize and realize that you're thinking or distracted. It's perfectly fine. As long as you make that awareness, as long as you make that mental label note that thought has arisen, or you got distracted, that's all you need to do. That is the practice of meditation. So don't be discouraged if you're thinking a lot. That's one of the biggest things I hear about people. Oh, I'm thinking too much. Great, that's exactly what you should be doing. Don't worry about it, right? The pure ability to know that you're thinking is a whole accomplishment all on its own. You recognize that you were thinking. You knew that you were thinking. It's exactly what you're supposed to be doing, so don't worry about it. Just know that you're thinking, right? That's where labeling comes in. Because once you label something, it will automatically go away, right? Because our mind is obsessed with time. It's obsessed with past, and it's obsessed with the future. And so when you sit for meditation and try to concentrate on the present and the here and now, your mind's like, excuse me, what are you doing? Let's think about that argument we had with our parents or our significant other the other day. Let's think about that again. Right? So it's literally making you feel terrible again, right? Or it's making you think about the anxieties of the future. Oh man, 2 more days and it's Monday, I have to start work all over again. Or I have this big project due. Or my plans aren't completed, blah, 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 right? It's obsessed with the past and it's obsessed with the future. And so it does not want you to stay with the now, with the present. But as soon as those types of thoughts or any distractions arise, as soon as you recognize them and label them, it'll be like, okay, fine. And it'll let go, right? It surrenders all on its own. And you can go back to your meditation object, which is your breath. Which brings us to our meditation object, our breath. So we use Anapanasati, right, mindfulness of breathing. And there's different methods to do it. The most traditional, according to the Anapanasati Sutra, is to find a strong point. Well, first of all, it's telling you to use the tip of your nose, right at your nostrils, to focus your meditation on. So you can literally feel the breath inhale as you inhale and exhale, right? You can feel the air enter and exit. So in the Anapanasati Sutra, one of the practices, the first few practices, tells you as you breathe in, you know that you're breathing in. As you breathe out, you know that you're breathing out. As you breathe in long, you know that you're breathing in long. As you breathe out long, you know that you're breathing out long. As you breathe in, if the breath is shallow, you know that the breath is shallow. You breathe out, you know that the breath is shallow, etc. Right? So you're really just focusing, concentrating on the tip of your nose, and you're feeling how the air feels. Is your breathing coarse? Is it smooth? Is it shallow? Is it heavy? Is the air cold? Is it warm? Right? You're literally just paying attention to the sensation of the breathing. And you keep your focus right there for the entirety of the meditation. Another option is to count your breath. So as we breathe in, 1, breathe out 1, in, 2, 2, 3, 3, 4, 4, until we get to 10. And you repeat. And at any point, if you get distracted or you lose count, you just restart again, go back from 1, and repeat. To add a little extra pizzazz to it, you can reverse counting. So once you get to 10, you reverse counting from 10 to 1. 10, 10, 9, 9, 8, 8, et cetera, and you go back down. But you can just start from 1 to 10 and repeat 1 to 10. Then later, when you have some practice, you can add that pizzazz. And so that's going to be our meditation object for most of our classes, is meditating on our breathing. And after a while, you can start to cycle through your body and find a different focal point that may be more prominent, where you can feel the breathing, right? So if it's not that strong at the tip of your nose, you can move the awareness to maybe the back of your throat, maybe to your chest, maybe to your abdomen as it extends, right? So you can find a different part of your body where you feel the breathing more prevalent than the tip of your nose, right? And use that as your focal point, as your object of meditation. It's still the breath, but it's just at a different location, right? And so, but we want to start, for today at least, just start with the tip of your nose. And then you can either do that for the entirety of your sit, if it works for you, or if not, then you can move to counting and see if that works any better. Typically, counting is easier because you're making mental notations, so it's easier to not get distracted because you have something extra on top of just the sensation. You have a mental count. So it's a little easier to stay focused doing it that way. And then hopefully, what time is it? We'll do walking meditation. I think we have time for walking meditation. Walking meditation is, so when we do sitting meditation, our object of meditation is our breath, right? Because we're sitting. For walking meditation, we shift our attention not from the breath, but to the sensation of walking. So now your focus is in your feet, basically. Because we walk, for the most part, pretty slow, we walk in mindfulness, right? So you're just really shifting your awareness from the breath down to your feet and then feeling the sensation as you move. So traditionally, there's anywhere from 2 to 18 steps per foot. There's 2 to 18 steps, right? So from the point of lifting your feet to dropping your feet, there's 18 points that you can make notations of. That's a lot of points. We won't go that far. We'll do 2 or 3. So as we lift our foot, you can make the mental note lifting. As you place your foot, make the mental note of placing, right? Or lifting and dropping, however you want to say it. Or you can add an extra step by saying lifting, shifting, placing, lifting, shifting, placing. And do that per foot. And we have to walk, and we walk slowly, because typically when we walk normally, 1 foot, so in meditation, walking meditation, we only lift 1 foot when the other foot has completely been placed, right? So 2 feet have to be on the ground before you make a shift from the other foot. But when we normally walk, 1 foot is half off the ground and the other foot is half on the ground, right? And so we're always walking like this, right? And both feet are never on the ground at the same time. But when we do walking meditation, both feet are always on the ground, and then you make the shift, right? And that way you have more time to be aware of those movements of the feet. And it's easier to make that concentration strong. So as we walk, just make the mental notes, lifting, placing, or lifting, shifting, placing. Or if you want to be super easy about it, just say left, right, left, right, left, right. Whatever you want to do. It's your practice, not mine. But the point is to find something that works for you, which is one of the reasons why we went through so many different methods and techniques last year, is because no one way is the best way, right? mindfulness and breathing may work best for me, but it may not work best for you, right? And so I gave you a whole bunch of different options. Even when we discussed breathing, meditation on the breath, I gave you 4 different practices of breathing meditation, right? And then I gave you a couple practices on chanting or mantra meditation. Then we went to walking meditation, visualization, all these different techniques. I did that so that I can give you a plate of options so that you can experiment with all of them and figure out what works for you best. Because there's no one correct way. And there shouldn't be, which is fine, right? But for the sake of not repeating myself every single time in classes, we're just going to stick with the one meditation on the breath. But because we are working on developing and honing and perfecting that concentration, I'll eventually go through the different techniques of breathing meditation over the next few classes. So those are the only ones I'm going to repeat myself on. But everything else, I encourage you to go back to the previous class videos and watch those if you are interested in learning the other different methods and techniques. And another thing is I would also highly, highly encourage you to go back and watch the videos on the 5 hindrances. The 5 hindrances are mental states of mind that we have to release and get over to a point where, because we cannot perfect our concentration, we cannot perfect our meditation practice while we still have those 5 hindrances. Those 5 hindrances are desire, ill will, sloth and torpor, laziness, and doubt. Those are the 5 hindrances. These are the 5 obstacles that whenever we are distracted, whenever a feeling comes up, whenever anything happens in our meditation that's not part of the meditation, it's always going to fall under one of those 5 hindrances. And until those are eradicated to a point, they don't have to be eradicated completely, but enough where your concentration can be developed into access concentration. And from access concentration, hopefully over the course of the next 6 classes, or 8 until our next retreat, spring retreat, we will hopefully have a strong enough access concentration where our retreat theme will be on the first mental absorption, the first jhana of the 4 jhanas, or dhyanas, which I would typically never teach. You will never see me up here teaching you any of the 4 jhanas typically, because those are highly advanced states of meditation and consciousness, levels of consciousness. So we'll typically never teach those, but the first one is typically something we will all experience at one point during our meditation, even if just very briefly. And usually in our retreats, at least 3 or 4 people come up to me and say, hey, I had this experience, like I don't know what it is. I would explain that. That's essentially the first jhana. The first jhana is achieving something called piti, which for the most part just means joy or ecstasy, right? It's a really high level of consciousness, first level of consciousness. And it's pure joy. It's that feeling of complete calming of body and mind, right? And so that's really what I hope for you all to achieve at the end of the series. And that will be the object for our retreat. Speaking of retreats, so for this year, we're going to have 3 types of retreats. We're going to have a full meditation retreat, full day, which is what we typically do from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., all day, a meditation retreat. So it's broken up into 4 or 5 meditation sessions and discussions throughout the day as well. And then we're going to do a half-day meditation retreat, it's like 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., which will be an intense retreat. There'll be 4 45-minute meditation sessions with only 1 discussion, Dharma talk discussion. So it's like an intense day of 4 hours of meditating. And then we're going to do an eight precepts retreat, which we haven't done in a while, but it's less meditation heavy and more chanting heavy, because chanting for us in our tradition is also a form of meditation. So you temporarily take the 8 precepts for the day, and the idea behind it is for you to experience what a life as a monk or nun is for that one day. So it kind of gives you an idea of the intense practices and sessions that we do throughout the day as monks and nuns. So we'll do that eventually. I think we're gonna alternate between the meditation retreat and the 8 precepts retreat from now on. So our next big full day retreat will be an 8 precepts retreat in April, maybe May, maybe after Vesak, the Buddha's birthday. But we'll do the half-day retreat probably next month. Okay. What time is it? Okay, last thing now is posture. Posture. Posture is a funny thing. But posture is also very important. There's no correct or ultimate perfect way to have a sit. So you can either sit on the floor or in a chair. You can literally lie in bed if you want to, or you can meditate doing a handstand. It really doesn't matter, right? We're not here to tame your body. Meditation is to tame your mind. So it doesn't really matter how you sit or where you sit. It's not important. But as long as you're in a position where you're comfortable enough to be able to endure your session, but not too comfortable where you're going to fall asleep, right? So for the most part, which, we sit on the floor to do meditation, and you can either sit regular cross-legged, or you can sit full lotus. Does everybody know what full lotus position is? If you don't know it, please raise your hand. Okay, so full lotus is putting your feet, your right foot, sitting on your left thigh, and your left foot sitting on your right thigh. Perfect. Can you do a zoom around to show people? You can show the people behind you. So you have to be pretty flexible. I don't even do full lotus because it's not that comfortable for me. But what I do is half lotus. So instead of putting both feet on your lap, you're putting only one foot. And that's, for me at least, and most people, that's the most comfortable. The reason we do half lotus or full lotus is because as you lift your feet off and place them, you create a pretty stable positioning of your back and knees. So you create this triangular, solid foundation to help stabilize you. So it's a very strong, stabilized position. If you can't do either or, what you can also do is sit on a higher seat. So I know these cushions are like paper thin, and I dislike them, but for our retreats, because we sit all day, we bring out the thicker cushions. And so when you practice at home or anywhere else, you can layer your cushions, so that way your butt is a little bit higher or at your levels of the knee, right? And that's pretty much the foundation you want to create. That way there's not too much pressure on one or multiple sides of your back or your knees or your feet, right? There's a free flow of blood, basically. So whether you do regular cross-legged, half lotus, or full lotus, find whatever is most comfortable for you. Since we don't typically sit on the floor very often in Western societies, it may take some practice. And your feet will fall asleep. And Winona, do you want to tell people what I tell people who complain about falling asleep feet? Deal with it. Suck it up, buttercup, is my motto for it. because you're basically training your body to do something new, right? Meditation is training your mind. You can't just sit for one meditation session and be like, I'm a Buddha now, look at that, right? No. Same way when you go to the gym, if you work out one time, like, yeah, I'm a bodybuilder now, look at me. You're not. You're not, right? So it has to take practice. So your body has to adapt and learn to the new way of sitting. And when you meditate, your mind is also learning a new way of being mindful. So it is a practice, but it's something that you can achieve, that is achievable, but you just have to live with it and stick with the pain. I'm sorry? Yes, thank you. I forgot about that. It's very important also to stretch. I do at least 5 minutes of stretching before any long period of meditation. Early in the morning, we sit for 90 minutes of sitting meditation and 20 minutes of walking. And so before that 90 minutes, you have to stretch. You have to stretch. Otherwise, you're going to be incomplete. I feel like I'm like 80 before I'm 40. I'm 33. Yes, I'm 33. But sometimes if I don't stretch, I'm like walking. I'm like, teacher, I feel like just as old as you are. And teacher's 84. It's like, you're so young and you're complaining. I'm like, it's not me, it's my body. It doesn't want to cooperate with me anymore. But stretching is very important. At least you want to stretch your back. So I don't know what it's called in yoga, but maybe if I feel like up to it, I'll show you. But you're essentially twisting your back, you're putting your knee up, and you're putting your arm around your knee, and you're pushing yourself to the side to stretch that back, and you do it on both sides. Stretching your back is most important. I don't care if you stretch your legs, your arms, it's not a big deal, but stretching your back is pretty important. And of course, your neck. Our back, our muscles are like Play-Doh in meditation, right? If you sit in your correct posture and you have good enough concentration with minimal to little distraction, your posture will stay upright for the entirety of the session. But just like Play-Doh, the only thing that will change the shape of it is external force, right? To change that mold. And for us, our external force are distractions. So your distractions are going to cause you to start to slouch because you're losing your mindfulness, you're losing your concentration. And so, but as long as you keep that mindfulness and you keep your concentration, you will stay upright. And one thing I like to do is to have an upright back is to lift your arms all the way up your head, stretch, and then just bring your arms slowly down to your lap. That will create the most natural and easy posture, back posture. And then placing your hands really doesn't matter too much. Traditionally, it's hand over hand, thumb slightly touching in your lap. Or you can place your hands on your knees if you'd like. The only thing about keeping your hands on your knees is to be sure that you don't use that to hold yourself up. You just want to just let your hands sit. And if you're on a chair, then same thing. You want to keep your back up straight, feet flat on the floor, and place your hands either on your lap or on your knees. Also making sure you hold yourself up. And then, what else is posture? Eyes. So typically, depending on, the more advanced you get in meditation, the more likely you will start to keep your eyes closed, because it'll just be easier for you. But for now, for the most part, you want to keep your eyes at least semi-open, and your head slightly down, so you're only seeing maybe like 2 or 3 feet in front of you, right? Because if you keep your eyes completely open, and then your eyes start to like look around and wander, right? If something happens over here and you see in the corner of your eye, you're going to have the habit of wanting to look over and see what it is. Also, on the other hand, if you keep your eyes completely closed and if you're not practiced enough, you may start just to fall asleep, right? And then also, according to the teachings, and I don't typically do this, but you can place and rest your tongue on the top of the roof of your mouth, on the palate of your mouth. And this does a few things. One, it helps keep the saliva on the back of your mouth so you're not constantly swallowing throughout the session. But also, like your back posture, if your tongue drops, it's also a sign of lost concentration. So just be mindful that when you are slouched, or if you have to make any movement or adjustment, it's fine to do it, but at least do it in mindfulness, right? Make the mental notation that you're having to move or adjust. So if you do start slouching and you have to adjust yourself again, just make the mental note adjusting or lifting or placing, whatever you want to say, and put yourself back into position and go back to your meditation object. Anything else missing? Posture? Is that right? Okay. And as we go through the sitting meditations and as our sessions get longer, and as you start developing correct concentration, you'll notice a few different things in the body that may be out of the ordinary, mostly just with your breath. Because what happens when we start to develop really strong concentration and we start entering that access concentration mindset, our breath will start to really slow down. It'll be very subtle, it'll be very shallow. It may even feel like you have stopped breathing altogether. And our first habit when we notice that is like, oh my God, I'm not breathing. Let me take a huge deep breath and inhale, right? And you make a huge exhale and sigh. Don't do that. You're breaking that concentration that you've worked so hard to achieve. So try to avoid making that big inhale or that sigh if you notice that you are breathing very slowly or shallow, if your breath is shallow. Because our breath is our object of meditation, if that type of thought arises where you're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm not breathing, and you want to take a deep breath, just shift your attention to something else. So you can shift your attention to the sensation of your chest as you breathe, right? As you inhale and exhale, and move your attention, your awareness to the chest for now. And then you can go back to your breathing. But having very short, subtle breathing is a pretty good sign. But don't try to sigh too much when it happens, because you may break your concentration. Okay, I'm going to stop there so that we can have some time to do our sitting meditation. I know that was a lot of information. I typically don't go over all that in the first class, but I wanted to get it out of the way so that we can truly start on our actual practice for our next class. So, before we sit, does anybody have any questions, concerns, emotional outbursts? Yeah, stretch. After people have questions. No questions? I'm sorry? Yes, Leon, can you show him, please? No questions? Okay, so feel free to do your stretching, and then we will sit for probably 15 minutes. I'll ring the bell, and we'll all stand to do walking meditation. And we'll probably just go around the inside of the shrine about 3 times. And then we'll sit back down, and then if anybody has any other questions or feels like sharing anything, we'll do that.
Session. We have to do that like 11:10. Would be better for us to go now before we got into the meditation.
It's up to you. It doesn't matter. As long as you're able to. If you want to stay and leave, just leave quietly. But it's fine. Whatever you like. after we rise from sitting to do walking meditation, we can clear the cushions in the back, make the path, so it's relatively walking. After we get back. So for the sake of time, we'll go ahead and then just sit. And then those that had walked away, they can come back mindfully. eyes. So we'll be doing our walking meditation now. If y'all want to line up more this side, Leon. Welcome back, everyone. We'll have to do some practice on that walking meditation piece next time. Had to do a little zigzag there, which is perfectly fine, which is actually pretty normal to do. But yes, ma'am. I'm sorry? Yes, thank you for bringing that up. So Winona has mentioned to make a mention or reminder as to how we walk in a group versus how we walk solo from walking meditation. So when you do walking group meditation, when it's in a formal way, which meaning that we are going in line like we did today, that type of formal walking, we have to almost walk as if we were doing drill, right, in military, where we have to match each other's pace. Typically, with walking meditation, we don't do this often during classes, but during services or retreats, we do, one of our sessions is walking meditation with chanting or mantra meditation. And so you go to the beat of the small bell, right? That's your cute step, right? When you hear the step of the bell, when you hear the sound of the bell, you're making one step. You hear it again, you make another step. So we're all on track. So when we're doing formal walking like that, we have to be sure that we distance ourselves correctly and we match others' pace so that we don't fall behind or make big gaps like there was today, which is why we had to make a zigzag. So if there's too many big gaps, then we can't walk the way we should be walking. What we did was perfectly fine. And it's actually pretty common that we have a zigzag when it's a large group, but that is on me for not reminding everyone to do that before. But when we do informal group walking meditation, where we're not in a line, like we're just kind of scattered, at that point you can walk your own pace, right? Because you're not relying on who's behind you or in front of you to walk. But when we're walking formally like this, in the future, please just be mindful to match the person's pace in front of you. There's no right or wrong level of paceness, but typically, as we mentioned earlier, is when you're placing your step, right, you're placing 1 foot distance, the correct distance would be pretty much the heel of your 1 foot should be a little bit right above the toes of your next foot, right? Like that's the correct spacing between each pace. And both feet have to be flat on the floor before you make the next step, right? So that's the correct pace. That way we're all matching, right? Versus walking too fast or we're pausing too long, right? Because we can tend to pause long depending on how many steps we add to our walking, right? Typically, like I mentioned today, we're just doing 2 or 3 steps, lifting and dropping or lifting, shifting, and placing, right? But when we add more steps in the future, then there's longer pauses, totally fine. But we just have to be mindful that in the future that we match each other so that we're not keeping people behind. Okay. I'm getting her approval because she mentioned it. I'm sorry? Solo meditation is all on you, buddy. That's however you want to walk. Yeah. So, we're a little bit over time, that's okay. Any questions, concerns? Does anybody want to share their experience today? Yes, sir.
So when you walk mindfully like that, is that how I used to be able to like walk on fresh granite and all that and not really have it bothering me? But now it's at my parents' house. When I try it again, so stepping like that, have anything with that, or do you think that's just calluses?
It can be both. In the sutras, or in the commentary of sutras, it's advised to walk on a long, flat, smooth path, right? That way you don't have the distractions of pebbles or rocks when you're stepping, right, to make those different sensations. You're not being distracted by that. But that's not always the case, right? We don't always have that ability to walk in a long, smooth, flat surface. And so if we are walking on rocks or pebbles or uneven surfaces, it shouldn't really make too much of a difference or bothersome to you, depending on how much you're letting it bother you, right? Because that's one of the hindrances, is ill will, the aversion. You're being averse to the unleveled rocky ground, right? So instead of complaining about it or complaining about, it could be health related, right? It could be on your foot, but if it's not, it's simply just because of where you're walking, then we have to return to our object meditation, acknowledge that the ground is not smooth and flat, and it is what it is. There's nothing you can do about it. Unless there is something you can do about it, then do something about it. If not, suck it up, buttercup. So like on the walking path here that we made, I tried as best I could to make it as flat and smooth as possible, but eventually it just ended up being how it is. So for the most part, it is pretty smooth and flat, but the only disadvantage is that it's not leveled, right? There's some ups and highs and lows to it, but for the most part, I think it's pretty smooth. So it doesn't cause too much distraction. You just may notice this very small uphill and downhill in the middle, but otherwise, I think it's fine, right? I'm sorry? Or in the front, right? Nice, long, smooth paths. Yeah. Does that help? Hopefully. Any other questions? Experiences?
I enjoy the white noise of wind.
I love white noise when I sit for long meditations, informally, like in the morning, because we sit after chanting, and so we're sitting after we chant, so I have nothing to do. But usually in the afternoon or in times where I have the time to do extra meditation, which is not very often, but when I do, I put on white noise. Static works wonders, I kid you not. That or listening to chanting in a different language, or anything in a different language. That's not too distracting, like not music, don't listen to music, because music is very distracting. But if you can look up like Chinese chanting or something, or just look for white noise, it really does help. And especially in the early stages of learning to meditate, it's very, very helpful. And I still use that method sometimes. Yes? I'm sorry? Metronome? You can use a metronome. It doesn't help me, but it's too... Well, I take that back. It can be helpful because like the static noise, if you are meditating correctly and your concentration is strong enough, you will start to phase out the sound, which is a good thing. It's a good sign. That's a sign that you're in the access concentration phase of things, right? So that's one thing where it really does help you gauge your meditation, is because if you're listening to static or listening to metronome or anything that's kind of external that's helping you, if after a while you simply are able to, and you are aware that you've phased out that sound, that's a good sign. That gives you kind of a gauge of where you're at, because eventually that will happen, I hope, for you. But you can use a metronome. I just like the constant static sound. Metronome comes and goes, and it's like, it's not for me. But it could be for you. It is for you. I already know that. Anything else? Okay. Well, that concludes our class for today. It's already overtime, so I was going to say something else, but no. We'll share in our next class. So again, we will have class every second and fourth Saturday, always at 10 a.m. So we'll do an hour and a half as usual. I don't know for sure yet when, but next month we'll have that half-day meditation retreat, probably toward the end of March, the fourth Saturday of March. Yes. I think that'll give us enough time to cover some of the topics I want to discuss before then, because that's the intense retreat day. The 4 45-minute sessions of chanting, of sitting meditation, followed by walking meditation. No, not 4. 2 45 minutes, 2 30 minutes, and then 4 walking meditation. Plus the mantra, walking. Everybody loves that one. I hope. Okay. If no questions or concern, thank you again. I will see you in next class. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha.